Okay, appears we have quorum. I recognize the Vice Chair to move approval of the minutes.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the minutes from January 22nd, 2019.
The question is on the motion that the minutes be approved. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. I declare the motion adopted. The first item on the agenda is the discussion of the Comprehensive Education Reform Bill. Before we get started, I want to let everybody know this is just going to be a presentation. We are not going to delve deeply. I know that the draft was only made available just a few hours ago, so we are going to give the committee plenty, time to digest it and look over it overnight. So after this presentation, we will probably have another meeting tomorrow that will be announced. And that's when we will actually start asking questions, maybe have some speakers and other, deep discussion of the bill. So I just want to let everybody know that from the up front. And I also want to say that this is, I guess you'd say, a vision that has been worked on with input from many. We have been very grateful to get information and ideas and suggestions from folks in the counties, folks at superintendent level, even our school board and HEPC. I appreciate the cooperation that has gone into it. And obviously, in the committee process, I'm hoping that we're going to make this bill the best bill that it can be, because we all care, I think, about the same thing. We want to help our students. We want to improve our outcomes. We want to empower the counties to be able to do their job, and those who are in the field who should know best. And that is the goal of this comprehensive education reform. So having said that, I will ask council to please come. I recognize the senator from Harrison for a point of inquiry.
Yes, thank you. Just out of curiosity, given the breadth of this bill, we just got it today, 126 pages, awful lot of subjects covered in it. Do you intend to extend, let me rephrase that, do you intend to cut off the debate at some point? Do you have a date that you have in mind that you want to vote on this bill?
I want to give everybody an opportunity to have input, get their questions answered, but we do have, I guess you would say, the intention to try to get it out in a reasonable manner. We don't want it to, drag on for days and days and days. But I really, truly want to get it vetted, and I want it to be something that everybody works together to do. So we will hopefully have the opportunity to do that.
What is that date?
Well, I can't give you the date, but we will be meeting tomorrow, and tomorrow we will definitely take a deep dive into it, like I said, and give opportunities for folks to ask questions and allow people to present. Let
me try one more way. Do you anticipate voting on it this week or next week?
I can't really say. Let's see how it goes.
So it's possible you could vote on it this week?
It is possible, yes.
Okay. It's assuming there's still debate going on. Will the debate go on into next week?
Again, let's just see how it goes. I don't want to really tie my hands.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Okay, Hank, will you please present the bill?
Yes, Madam Chair, and if it is okay with the committee, I don't have a complete abstract of the bill yet, so I'm going to try to just kind of quickly go through it page by page, and so if that's, I'll start on page 4 of the abstract or of the bill down at the bottom. Basically, there's provisions in here that provides for the authorization of charter schools, and if the charter school chooses in its application, in its approved application, to avail itself of the Public Employees Insurance Agency, it may do so. And then that language is continued on for the next couple pages of that section. As well as on page 8, just to make it consistent with authorizing a charter school to avail themselves of the Public Employees Insurance Agency, or to use that program. At the bottom of page 13 is some language that allows members of the Teachers Retirement System to convert for every 10 days of sick leave, 1 month of PEIA coverage. This is to address just basically to incentivize teacher attendance. Then over on page 14 is more language that is just to be consistent with allowing charter schools to participate in the public PEI coverage. Starting over on page 16 and over onto page 17 of the bill, and then down on page, at the bottom of 17, then on the top of 18, what this language does is basically allows, it provides that the county board levy rates are what they are right now, but gives the county boards the authority, if they choose to increase their levy rate to the statutory maximum, so that they can derive more revenue for that purpose. And this kind of ties in with another section a little bit later that I'll bring up when I get to it. On page 20, there's a tax credit for classroom teachers in the amount of $250 maximum. That's for qualifying educational expenses, which includes the cost relating to computer equipment, education-related software and services, textbooks, workbooks, curricula, and other items. Also, there's a non-severability provision, which basically provides that if anything in the act is held invalid, then the rest of this act is also held invalid. And then starting on the bottom of page 20, it strikes through the existing language on student transfers and insert some new language that includes the county board policy on how that is to work. On page 26, yes.
I want to point out that I think it's important to say that it's permissive, that we are allowing county boards to create a new policy regarding
Right.
that. Okay, thank you. Sorry, continue.
Sure. Over on page 26, this increases in grades 1 through 6 the teacher-pupil ratio from 25 to 28. Currently, under certain circumstances, the pupil-teacher ratio can be increased by 3, so this would effectively increase it from a minimum of 25, maximum of 28, to a minimum of 28, maximum of 31. However, there's provisions in here relating to teacher pay. They get paid a certain amount for each child above 25. For those purposes, the minimum number above which they get additional compensation for remains at 25 students per teacher.
Sorry, one second, Hank.
So could he possibly explain it in a different way that you're basically saying that you're capping at 25? They will not get any additional money at 25 the way you said it at the end.
Well, okay, no. What this section or these changes do is that it increases the teacher-pupil ratio in grades 1 through 6 from its current 25 minimum to the 28. However, right now, teachers receive additional compensation for any students they have above the 25. And this, for those purposes, for compensation purposes, it remains at 25. So they still would receive compensation for any children over the age of, or excuse me, any additional children over 25 students.
Okay. Senior Senator from the 5th. I'm glad, thank you, Hank, for clarifying that. I just want to point out that, really, I hope you guys will just let him do the presentation. And of course, I want you guys to understand, maybe you can jot down, questions or notes. I also want to point out, and I should have said this earlier, we do have some paper copies. If members would like a paper copy, please just let us know and we will get you one. Okay?
Well, Madam Chair, this
Yes.
is the first I've read of any of these. I've had no meetings, no discussion, no whatsoever. So in all due respect to your request, he is going through a bill that I think it is pretty important for us to understand every aspect. So if we do have a question, I think it is prudent for this body to be able to answer that question.
Absolutely, like I said.
Well, that isn't what you just said.
I just want him to give us the overview, because we will not have time to do the overview and ask all the questions, and I want to be fair to everyone who asks questions, because I'm sure that there will be plenty of those. So all I'm saying is, let's let the presentation happen, and we will absolutely be asking questions, and I want to give everyone a fair chance at that. So thank you. Go on, Hank, please.
Okay, over on page 30, there's some language that basically provides that central office administrators, supervisors, and directors serve at the will and pleasure of the superintendent and may be removed by the superintendent upon approval of the county board. Let's see. Okay, starting at the bottom of page 31 is basically some language that would provide that in the case of a work stoppage or a strike, that teacher pay would be withheld. However, there's additional language that also indicates that if the 200-day contract is fulfilled at the later time when they make up the day, the employment day, that they would receive pay for that, and that they would, and that if there's any money that's left over by the county, it's to be remitted to the Department of Education. And then there's also some language that says that if a day that was originally scheduled for instruction is canceled, the school for which the day was canceled may not participate in any interscholastic athletic events during any part of that same day. So the next on that same page, on page 32, is language that says that the teacher's recommendation relating to whether or not students should be promoted to the next grade level shall be a primary consideration when making that determination, the determination of whether or not a student should be promoted to the next grade. The next section, starting on page 32, is provisions that authorize charter schools. You'll see the legislative purpose and intent language, and then some definitions. Just highlight a few of those. Applicant means any group or entity with 501c3 tax-exempt status, or that submit an application for a 501c3 tax-exempt status that develops and submits an application for a public charter school as an authorizer. And another important definition to point out is the one just below it, basically setting forth who the authorizers, who can authorize charter schools. One is the county board in which the public charter school is located. Second is 2 or more county boards can join together to authorize a public charter school. Any West Virginia public or private institution of higher education. And then the West Virginia Public Charter School Commission, which is established later on in this article, but now that's limited only to certain low-performing school districts. So they can only authorize charter schools in the low-performing school districts. So over on page 37, it talks about some of the, well, actually starting back on page, just on page 20 or 35, it starts outlining some of the parameters for charter schools. And then at the very bottom, it starts talking about some of the things that a public charter school is required to do. And then over on the next page on 37, it provides some things that charter schools can do. And then over on page 38, it sets forth parameters for a public charter school governing board. And Over on page 39 is language relating to determining enrollment in a public charter school. And then the requirements starting on page 40 for the application requirements for submitting an application to an authorizer to become a public charter school. And those are pretty significant, the application requirements. So next is the authorizer duties and responsibilities. And there are provisions over on page 46 for virtual public charter schools. And then starting on page 7 are the requirements for a public charter school contract. And then starting on pages 49 through 52, there's various language about the renewal of the charter contracts and revocation of those contracts, and the right to appeal to the Public Charter School Commission, which is created later on in this section, which created in section 10 on page 53. Basically, the commission serves, I guess, mainly as an appeal board, but can serve as an authorizer in cases if a charter school is sought to be established in a school district that doesn't meet standards as defined by state board policy. The subsection B on page 54 sets forth the membership of the commission. The state superintendent of schools or a designee, the chancellor for the policy commission or a designee, chancellor for the community and technical college education or a designee. 2 members appointed by the governor with advice and consent of the Senate. 3 appointed by the President of the Senate with 1 appointee recommended by members of the minority party, and then 3 appointed by the Speaker with 1 of the appointees recommended by members of the minority party in the House. Starting over on page 66, talks about the appeal of an authorizer's decision to a public charter school, and I think it relates to appealing whether or not to establish the charter school, whether to renew a charter contract, whether to revoke a charter. Okay, on page 13 is some language about funding for public charter schools. Basically, the overall idea in the language on page 13 is that the total allowance.
Hank, yeah.
57, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm on 57. I hope,
Okay,
is it lining up with?
So far.
Okay. The overall idea is to, that charter schools are to receive 90% of the overall allowance that county boards are to receive, or as calculated under the school aid formula. It allows the state board to do a rule. It does provide for, in certain instances where there's a couple steps that aren't based on student enrollment, such as step 6-4, transportation, and step 6A, where the recurrent expense, where they can actually increase a little bit, provide a little bit of extra funding to the counties to provide to the charter school if that is necessary. It just kind of gives them authorization in that rule to do that. And then there's some language on page 58 about the facilities for public charter schools, reporting requirements below that. So let's see, starting. Okay, on page 61 is some language that allows a public charter school to participate in the teachers' retirement system if they choose. And there's several pages of existing code with that are modified for that purpose. Then there's some modifications to the attendance director provisions over on 68. Okay, this is a fairly significant change on page 72. We're broadening the definition of professional student support personnel to include personnel who provide direct social and emotional support services to students, including but not limited to social workers and psychologists.
That was 72, I believe?
72. Yeah.
Sorry, I believe that was page 72. Yeah, that was the retirement section, and there was a lot of pages there. Okay,
Yeah, a
sorry.
lot of, in some areas, there's just a lot of existing code that's modified for the purpose of allowing a charter school to participate in the
employment
PEIA, the retirement systems, and also BRIM as well.
So this section, Hank, we're talking about step 5 in the funding formula, correct? The one that you just told us about, the expanding the definition of professional services?
Yes, that is correct.
That's step
That is
5?
correct.
Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
that ties in with that. Over on page 73, basically sets a flat 1,400 minimum enrollment. Right now, the way that it works is counties who have less than 14 in minimum enrollment, 1,400, have to, they get a little bit of an extra bump, but they don't get all the way back up to 1,400. This sets a flat minimum for school aid funding purposes of 1,400 students in net enrollment. So, okay, on page 76 is is some new step 5 funding language, and if I remember correctly, I think this language provides about an extra $24 or $25 million for from the state for the employment of those individuals.
And the purpose for that is so that every single school is going to be able to hire
Right.
one of those individuals.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, on page 79 is some language that basically sets the maximum local share at the 15-16 levels. And this basically, whenever you decrease local share, it increases state aid. So in a lot of counties, this will result, probably in most counties actually, in additional state aid, and also in the previous section that allowed county boards to increase their levy rates if they chose to, it would allow them to keep that money, and instead of having a reduction in state aid due to increasing their levy rates. So let's see. And then over on page 82 is some additional language that's modified to fit charter schools into the existing funding for high-cost, high-acuity needs students. The next section of the bill establishes or provides for education savings accounts. Let's see. And there's language in here that basically caps it to the level that is appropriated by the legislature. Of course, the treasurer would be the agency that would administer that. So then starting over on page 94 is a 5% pay increase for teachers. And the new language, the new salary schedule actually starts on page 95. And then on page 96, provides that each classroom teacher providing math instruction in the teacher's certified area of study for at least 60% of the time the teacher is providing instruction is to basically be considered 3 additional steps in the salary schedule.
Okay, so I think now we are off kilter in terms of the numbers.
Okay.
Just so
okay.
you know. So
Okay.
that section that he's referring to is actually page 98 on the bill that's online.
Okay. Okay, now the next section, which I think would be on your page 97, is the one-time bonus that is similar, not exactly the same, but is similar to what was included in the governor's bill for the one-time bonus for math teachers who take the specialized mathematics course, and then also meet the requirement that that 60% of that they be certified in 60% of the courses that they teach in mathematics. Okay, the next section basically is part of beginning freezing equity. We're getting rid of the calculation that's currently in code for defining what equity is. The equity supplement remains the same. The equity supplement is not changed. Okay, over on page, I think would be 102. I think that yours is one in advance of mine, is basically authority for the county boards to provide funding incentives. Currently, the statute requires that the the salaries be equal and uniform throughout the county, depending on the years of experience and the education level. This provides exceptions in cases of subject matter areas where there's a shortage, and geographic areas, and the way I've explained that before, this is a little bit different than locality pay, because this is only within the county. It's not to make up for cost of living adjustments or border counties or anything such as that. It's, for example, if you have a lower performing school within the county and you want to get your better teachers out to that school, you can pay an incentive to those teachers to teach at that school. And then there's also for teacher mentors, basically, or coaches that participate in a mentoring or teacher induction program. They also can receive a salary supplement from the county. Okay, starting on, I think, probably is your page 106, is some language that basically allows county boards to establish a policy that would allow them to base reductions in force decisions on more than seniority. There's also language included that requires them to consider in their policy consider including in their policy the hiring criteria that are outlined for teachers, the teacher hiring criteria, which are actually on the previous page there. This is similar to a bill that was introduced back in 2 sessions ago, and I think that there was a lot of discussion on that, and it's mainly the agreed-to language, or at least I've somewhat agreed-to language. I don't know what the passage rate was, but it did pass over to the House. And the only difference here is that it does, in defining qualifications, want the county to consider the teacher hiring criteria. So that's, let's see. And that's pretty much what that entire section does, is to modify that section for that purpose. The next section, starting on page 110, is the a 5% pay increase for service personnel. And this is a long section that's full of existing code language. The equity supplement is kept in there with the, kept in that section. Okay, language on page 122 provides that no amount of an employee's pay may be withheld or deducted by the county board for the purpose of paying dues to certain employee organizations unless the employee within the last year submitted a request for the withholding or deduction. It requires county boards to establish procedures for how that is to be accomplished. The next section, and there's quite a few changes in Section 10, and I guess this is probably, I would say, on your page 123. I think I'm on, I'll tell you what section I'm
122.
What?
122.
Okay, well, it's my 122 too. 18A 410. Okay. This is actually language from a bill that was introduced in 2013. Currently, teachers earn their personal leave at the beginning of the employment term. This changes that so that they earn it throughout the year. So that all the changes to this section, I think, are basically for that purpose. And then lastly, there's some changes to the Underwood Scholarship Program. There's a program that basically establishes that you have to agree to not have to pay back the loan to teach in West Virginia for 5 years in basically high-need areas. And then lastly, let's see. Okay, a couple other things on page 137. Requires the county board to provide written notice of insurance covered to each of its insureds, basically of the brim coverage that they're eligible for, which is a total of about $6 million. And then some additional language down at the bottom that allows charter schools to obtain brim coverage if they choose to do so. And Madam Chair, that concludes my going through the bill.
Thank you very much. I know that, again, this is a really big bill. We just wanted to do an overview to present it. Part of the reason for why Hank's numbers were, a little bit different than ours is because, there are little cleanups that we're still working on and trying to do. So the draft that you have, please understand, it might still be cleaned up a little bit. And obviously, when we have, it completely cleaned up, we will let you know, and it will not say draft anymore across it. So we have a few minutes if we want to try starting to ask some questions, but with the understanding that it's only a few minutes. So please, anybody who asks questions, just recognize that we are limited in time. It doesn't mean we won't continue. And I have been notified that we will be continuing this meeting tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Okay, the senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually have a question for you, Madam Chair. You mentioned there the bill we have before us and the process moving forward. It seems to me that at this point in time, we have 3 versions in front of us. I've got what I was given earlier today, got what we have online here now, which copies were provided of, and what Hank's reading from seems to be a little bit different. So are we going to have a single version by the time we discuss this tomorrow?
Yes, absolutely. And the only difference between the one that council has and ours is just that he's, again, cleaned up a little bit of the language. The version you were given this morning was in an effort to try to give you something as soon as possible, and we did tell you that it was still a work in progress. So what you're going to see is not going to be substantially different than what's in front of you right now.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate at least some effort to reach out, but I got a bill a couple hours ago that was 140 some pages. Then I got a different version that's 130 some pages, and this is, as you said rightly, a comprehensive bill, and I'm trying to sort through it.
Of course.
And it's especially difficult if we have different versions floating before us and are then told, well, we may vote on this tomorrow.
Yeah.
So is it your intention that we will have a single version and that we may very well vote on this tomorrow?
That is a possibility.
Okay, so which version should I, the paper copy that I was just given, the copy that's online, which copy
The
should?
paper copy is the same as what is online.
Okay.
That
But
is the
that's,
same version.
that's different than what Hank
Like I
has.
said, he has some cleanup that he is doing, but it's not really substantial different. There's not like different numbers, for example. It's cleanup that he's working on, and we will have that final version, and we will post it online as soon as possible.
Okay, so what we will be debating tomorrow actually is not available to us yet.
No, not yet, which is why it says draft on what you see uploaded on the server. I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
I don't know what to say.
We're trying to
Thank you, Madam
clean
Chair.
it up. Okay, thank you. Okay, the senior senator from the 5th.
Thank you. Hank, is there a fiscal note on this as it relates to, there's a number of moving parts, and you're freezing parts of it in terms of local share, you're changing the formula in some areas as it relates to that, and those are quite comprehensive, and we've actually had about the same amount of time to review them in the past couple of years. So the sooner the better, and this is a request from the State Department of Education as well, we need to have copies of those so that we can see them and know clearly what they do. So let me ask you a specific question related to local share. So from what I heard, and I've reviewed it just a little bit, so you're going to freeze the local share, the amount that the counties get, cap it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, and you're just going to cap it at the 2015 amount?
2015, 2016. And I also want to say that relating to the fiscal note, I have sent the department bits and pieces, but you're absolutely right. This has so many components that they do need to see the entire bill, and I will get that to them.
Okay.
But yes, it caps it at the 15, 16 levels. So basically, which would, I think, if I remember correctly, for 38 counties, I think that would would result in a net increase for them in, if I'm thinking right, I shouldn't say that because I might be getting that confused. With
Okay,
another
so,
schedule that
but the net result could increase it for this year, but it's capped so it won't grow anymore in the future years.
It's capped at the 2015, 2016 level. So basically, it can't go any higher than it was in 2015, 2016
And it won't be any increases, correct?
in local share. That's correct.
Okay,
That's
okay.
correct.
And
So-
when we did this, and it was a number of years ago, we actually, and it's been, given back to me from the county superintendents and from people that what we did in the past, where we went from only getting 2% to 6% and then to 10% over a success of 2 years, correct? We did 4% per year.
Yeah, that's, what you're talking about is for school aid funding purposes, the levy rate that's used, currently used 90%. It used to be 98, of the levy rate.
So what the counties have told me, that's giving them great flexibility in addressing some of their special needs locally.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, if we're going to do that, could someone do the calculations if we increase the amount that the locals get, another 4% 1 year and 4% the next year, to where, for instance, let's take Berkeley County as an example. Mm-hmm. Berkeley County spends about $42 million on special education. Mm-hmm. How many counties have a $42 million budget?
I don't know. I can check on it, but
So if you're looking at, they spend $42 million, if you increase that local share percentage, wouldn't that give them more money to spend as they see fit to some of the local needs?
When you say increase the local share percentage, are you talking about where we reduce the 98 to the 90?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, if we would actually reduce that percentage more, it would provide them with more funding because it would further reduce local share for the school aid formula purposes, which would result in more state aid. That's correct.
Yes. So what I'm saying is just go ahead and go from, an additional 4% this year and an additional 4% the next year. That way it will take you time. That way you can adjust in your school aid formula and it's not one hit all at 1 year. So let me, and then I'm sort of confused in what I'm seeing in terms of and this will be my last question, so you don't have to worry. I'll have more later, but as it relates to the charter schools, is that a separate pool of money that we're setting up, or how are they? How do you fund charter schools under this under this bill?
It actually requires the state board to do a rule. It's pretty complicated when you start thinking about how to fund charter schools, because you've got newly established, you have existing public schools that are converted to charter schools, and then you look at the whether or not they're going to provide transportation, whether the charter school's going to provide transportation, whether the county's going to provide transportation.
Do they have an open enrollment in this?
There is some provisions in here, and it's Section 4, I think, of the charter school provision that basically, I think, requires a lottery, and it's I can find it on mine fairly quickly if it's Section 4. And it also has some language about recruitment of, let's see, okay, requires that every charter school, and I'm on the bottom of page 39, shall submit a recruitment and retention plan annually to its authorizer for recruiting certain student populations. So it requires a lottery, and then, of course, that would be for a newly established charter school. For a
so let's just suffice to say, in your abstract, that will outline how those things will be done and handled. Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Senator. The senator from Raleigh.
Thank you, Hank. It is a lot to digest, and you've put in a lot of work, no doubt about that. The thing that really surprised me is the charter school term. Mm-hmm. I've been involved in education since charter schools began, not personally with any charter schools, but I've heard about them and been in seminars and all sorts of things. What I'm seeing in this and what I'm hearing, I've never defined it as a charter school. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing innovation opportunities for counties to address problem areas and schools, and based on performance and such, to be able to lift them up. That's not my concept typically of a charter school. But these charter schools, if they could specialize in music or science or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. And if we call them a charter school in statute, it's my understanding they're eligible for some funding that
It's federal funding. That's the reason the term is used. Mm-hmm. Okay. So probably what we have to be careful of is people misinterpreting, because I'm totally familiar with what charter schools are across the nation, but I would urge the board to understand that what this is unique to West Virginia for our own purposes and needs. It is not what you would typically think of, at least myself, as a charter school. It's really something like, almost like the Mountaineer Academy. We are all very proud of the Mountaineer Academy and what they are doing and what they have done. And in essence, are they a charter school the way we're kind of setting this up here? Would you say that?
The Mountaineer Challenge Academy?
Yes.
Well, a lot of people equate the Mountaineer Challenge Academy as a charter school. I think they're funded through the National Guard. I
Right.
believe.
Besides the funding, I mean
Yeah.
just the innovation and the ability to address real needs of the local community.
I've certainly heard that that comparison made. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it, and the individual counties have say-so as to whether or not somebody gets this opportunity to have a charter school in their county, or if they join counties together. Is that correct?
That is correct to a certain extent. Yes, I think so. I think in most cases the counties would probably be the authorizer. It also allows higher ed institutions, and in certain instances, the Public Charter School Commission is created for lower performing school districts to authorize a charter school. So.
Okay, so then the concept of the West Virginia charter school proposal is to give local counties, local areas, the opportunity to innovate and meet the needs that are represented there, because we are diverse, and rural and urban. And what works one place will not work in another place. So this empowers the teachers and the principals and the counties to do something great. Let's hope they can. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we have only a couple more minutes, so I just want to mention that. The Senator from Monongalia.
Thank you, Chairman. Was tomorrow.
No, I don't think it will have a bill number until it's actually reported to the floor is when they'll assign it a bill number.
And how does the general public get access to it? They can't search draft online.
I'll have to check on that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that they plan to provide PDF copies available to anyone that wants it. So.
Well, when I say general public, I mean people in Harper's Ferry or Bluefield. How do they get? They're not sitting here in a room with us. How do they get a copy of it?
I believe it's on the agenda for our committee, and that there's a hyperlink to the bill. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that you can find it through the committee agenda.
Thank you.
Only question? Okay. Well, we got time for one more. Senior Senator from the 16th.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just have a question. So following up on the Senator's question regarding charter school that really isn't a charter school, but we're did I understand this right? We're calling it a charter school so that we could qualify for federal dollars that are meant for charter schools, but this is really not a charter school. We're just calling it a charter school. Am I getting this correct? Because to me, that's kind of false pretenses, I think. But I just want to make sure before we leave, I understood what you were saying. So I don't want to go off and get a misconception here. So
right.
Please explain to me, is this a charter school or isn't it?
Well, there's been consideration, I guess, of calling it something different than charter schools, but the problem is that in statute you have to call it a charter school to get to be eligible for certain federal funding, is my understanding. So.
Well, I know, but I would think that, I mean, you just can't sit there and make up a name and say all of a sudden it meets the federal statute. You can call anything. I mean, I just really, I think we're going down a very dangerous path here, that we are calling something that supposedly is not something so that we could qualify for federal dollars for charter schools.
If I may, Senator, so just so you know, it is a charter school. What I think got confused in the back and forth is that we're making the point that in West Virginia, we already have had some specialized schools that are essentially, for all effects and purposes, operating like a charter school, and that this is the same. We are just making it official that we are allowing that kind of innovation, that kind of specialized opportunity for public students. And so I think that's what got kind of confused in the questions that were asked back and forth. So this is charter schools. But the point that we were making is that things that we have had in West Virginia before that we don't call charter schools have operated very similar, and we're kind of just expanding it. I mean, we're just giving the opportunity for counties to be able to do this, if they wish. And so it is definitely a charter school. We're not misnaming it. So I just
Okay, but
wanted to
that's not what
clarify.
I heard earlier. I heard a whole definition that this really isn't charter schools, but we're naming it so that we can get federal dollars as charter schools. So this is a little different
I'm
definition.
just clarifying that what they were asking about were things like Mountaineer Challenge Academy, which wasn't called a charter school when we started it, but operates almost essentially as a charter school. So they were talking about what is currently right now in West Virginia. They weren't really referring to what we're doing in this bill.
Are there other examples other than Mountaineer Challenge
Well, there had
Academy?
been some innovation zones, district schools.
But they're not charter schools.
Well, they're operating in a similar format as a charter school, yes. Okay, I think we're out of time. Yes. So we have another committee, so I just wanted to thank everyone for the cooperation. And like I said, we'll be meeting tomorrow, and of course, I'll be announcing that from the floor. I recognize my vice chair for a motion.
Madam Chair, I move we adjourn.
The motion has been made to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, all those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Thank you.